Hey guys, we're here today to talk a little bit about our recent trip to Universal Studios. We got a ton of questions just about what the new park, environment is like. And just to give a little information, we just recently drove down from Nashville. It's about 9.5 to 10 hours. We spent a day in the parks, we visited 2 resorts, and we just kind of got a feel for what it's like down there. So, this is kind of our experience and an answer to a lot of the questions that we received.
Yeah, so we got a variety of questions. So I kind of broke them into categories. So just to give you an idea of kind of where we're going, some of the questions overlap, but in general, we're going to start with just some overall park questions. Then we'll get into some more specifics about what it's like for rides and for shows. We'll also answer some questions about masks. So a lot of people asked about kind of our experience with wearing the masks. And then we'll kind of end with the hotels and some other just general park questions that maybe aren't as specifically tied to the new safety precautions.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of questions, and I tried to combine them as best I can. So you ready?
Yeah, lead it. You've got the list, so.
All right. So the first general type of question that we got about the process is, are reservations needed, and how did kind of the process of getting into the parks work?
Yeah, so I can kind of talk about that. Reservations are not needed. They do have limited capacity in the parks, but to my knowledge, those have never been reached at Universal or Islands of Adventure. They were just reached this weekend at Volcano Bay, so they did reach capacity there. But again, there are no reservations. You just go to the park, and so far you've been fine just to get in.
Yeah, for our experience, we actually made this trip pretty last minute. So we booked our hotels the night of for one of them. And so, yeah, I thought it was very easy to like plan a last minute trip. So I think if you're planning ahead, it should be no problem. Relatedly, for getting into the parks, so the process of like getting into the parks, they do require temperature checks.
Yep.
I found that extremely easy. You can either, if you're coming from not a hotel, you can get your temperature check kind of at the entrance. We came from hotels both times, so there you can just have them check your temperature, and they would give you a wristband. So once you did that first thing in the morning, either going through security or at the hotel, you'd have that wristband, and then you were good for going in and out of the hotel all day.
Yeah, so I would say it's not at the parks that they do it. It's actually, you can't even get to City Walk. So if you enter a hotel of Universal property, you have to get it checked. Or if you enter City Walk, you get it checked there if you didn't go through a hotel. And then, that band, it changes every day, the color. But that essentially lets them know that you've already had a temperature check, been okayed, and anywhere on Universal property that does a temperature check, you can now bypass that check by just showing your wrist. It was really efficient, well done, and it was all temperature that was taken contactless, and no issues at all with that.
Yeah, I found that very easy. So I
Yep.
think they did about as well as they could on that one. All right, the next question is going to be about the general park atmosphere. So in the theme parks and in City Walk, what did we generally think about the atmosphere? Were they letting less people in? Those type of questions.
Yeah, so I would say they were letting less people in the sense that there was just less people at the parks. They weren't actively reducing the number of people in the parks or in City Walk. Now, I will say attractions had lower attendance or lower numbers of people allowed in the lines. Restaurants had lower numbers of people. Quick service, things like that did. But in terms of the actual park or getting into City Walk, as far as I could tell, I experienced no restrictions. I haven't heard of any going on as well. So, the atmosphere in terms of being allowed in, no different.
Yeah, and then when it comes to the crowds in the park, I actually think we were there on a Saturday, and I think that was actually one of the busiest days they've had so far.
Yeah, I've heard that too, that the Saturday we were there was actually the busiest day that they've had to date since they've reopened.
Yeah, and when you're getting to like general atmosphere with crowds, though, to me it's still we don't go to Universal super frequently, but we did go this past March, so right before all of the closures happened, and it definitely felt less busy than that. So if you're comparing it to prior times, it's definitely less crowded than that. People had asked, like, are there normal bottlenecks? So, like, is Harry Potter still really busy, that area? And I do think those were probably the most crowded areas. But personally, I didn't think they felt anywhere close to, like, the normal crowds in there.
So I actually disagree a little. I think that Diagon Alley was definitely not as crowded as usual. Nowhere else in the park was as crowded as usual. But I will say, to me, Hogsmeade or the area where Hagrid's is was just as crowded feeling to me as any other time. And I think it's really just because of Hagrid's. And it's already a very small, narrow walkway. That place, or that particular area of the park, did seem very crowded to me. But other than that, it was definitely noticeably less crowded throughout the remainder of both parks.
I agree. Yeah. And so another question that we had just about the general park atmosphere is hand sanitizer. So we had a few questions about, is it readily available throughout the park as you kind of walk around?
I would say absolutely not. It is not available almost anywhere in the parks. I will say, though, that in order to get on any attraction, they do provide it to you, and they actually make you use it. They put it right in your hand right before you get onto any attraction, but they don't give it to you when you get off, and there is not very many, if any, just hand sanitizing stations around the park. So we did bring our own. We had a small one in our pocket that we used, and I was kind of glad we did because I was surprised at how infrequent hand sanitizing stations were found throughout the parks.
Yeah, they basically had, I think, hand sanitizing. Like if you went to get a butterbeer, some of the butterbeer stations would have like a dispenser. So maybe some of the food related areas. But yeah, if you're just walking around, I'd say you'd pop into a restroom if you want to wash your hands, or just bring like a little sanitizer if you have any at home. I would say that you weren't like touching anything to get the hand sanitizer when you went on the rides. It was cast members would be squirting sanitizer into your hands. But it just general like stations like you'd find if you walked around maybe a mall or a store, like those type of things, or airport, weren't as common as I thought they would be. I thought they'd be more. They still did a good job, but they weren't.
I just thought they'd be everywhere, but they weren't.
Relatedly, so did the workers make sure that the safety precautions were being enforced? So did we see workers kind of correcting if people weren't wearing masks or weren't distancing?
Yeah, I would say generally they were. I think that it's tough for the workers or the employees there because it's not their job. Like they actually have a role that they have to fulfill, and this would be on top of it. But when they did notice when they did notice a guest with a mask either, below their nose or just off their face in general, they were pretty quick to tell them to do that. That being said, they weren't just standing there constantly on the lookout for guests who had their masks down because, like I said, they have other jobs that they have to perform. But I did notice quite often if, they caught a guest, and they're walking by or anything like that with a mask not being worn properly, they were pretty quick to tell them when they noticed that, hey, you got to fix that.
Yeah, and relatedly, we had a few questions about like what percentage of guests were following the guidelines or wearing the mask specifically. I actually thought it was optimistic, so I was like, oh, it's 199%. And then we started actually like counting people going around, and what would you say it probably?
I mean, I would say 95% of people have a mask on. Probably 80 to 85% of people wore them the correct way. Some guests feel apparently that if you wear a mask over your mouth, that's sufficient. The workers there don't agree, and those are the most common thing you'll see the employees telling guests to do is to pull the mask up over your nose. But, it is probably 80-85% of guests are wearing them correctly at any given time.
Yeah, and I would say it was definitely more common for people wearing them correctly in the morning. I felt like later in the day, as maybe it's hotter or whatever, I felt like it was maybe less common. But I do think the workers or the employees were doing the best they could to kind of help keep that. And I think overall, a lot of the guests were following the guidelines. So this is kind of related in that I think most people were wearing the masks. We also had questions of even outside of the ride queues, were people kind of respecting social distancing? And I'd say overall, yes. I mean, you'd be walking and people be walking next to you every so often, but I don't think it was like on top of each other as maybe common in the parks. Do you agree? Or
I disagree.
Okay.
I think social distancing took place in the queues. But outside, no, I don't think that they did. People were just walking around, where they were. And it's not like somebody was walking right on top of you anywhere. But, I mean, I generally don't find that to be the case on any day in the parks unless, everyone's trying to rush to a certain ride in the morning or something like that. So there were not social distancing markers. There's not, walk on this side of the path if you're going this way and the other side if you're going the other way throughout the general park. It was really only in restaurants, queues, some stuff in the stores around where you're checking out. But in the general just area of the park, I don't think there was any attempt to encourage social distancing. That being said, the parks are generally less busy, so it's not that hard to, if you're not comfortable with how close someone is to you, just move a little bit to the side and walk but there is no actually enforcing of that outside of those areas I just talked about.
Yeah, like if we went and grabbed a butterbeer, if you're eating or drinking, you can take your mask off. We'll talk more about kind of mask specific stuff in a second. But like if, yeah, there were people there, we just stepped to the side and kind of find a quiet place so we weren't around people, especially with our masks off. Okay, so those were like the general park ones. Now let's dive a bit deeper into maybe some ride specific questions. So the first one was, are there social distancing markers for all rides, both inside and outside?
I think so. Yeah, I don't recall a single ride that we went on that did not have them. They're not necessarily all outside as well. I mean, certain rides just don't have queues that fill up enough to be outside. But for instance, Hagrid's, which was a very long one, you have the inside and outside part of the queue. There's social distancing markers and the inside and the outside. And I think that in terms of how many markers on the ground they've placed in rides, they have done more than enough in terms of accounting for how long could this queue actually get. No problem. I didn't see a single occurrence that we went on where the line extended beyond where the social distancing markers were located.
Yeah, the only ride where I experienced any type of, I guess, not failure, but like not optimal social distancing was at the very end of Hagrid's. It kind of, because the ride's a continuous loader, it kind of got where I feel like you were a little more pushed, but it was maybe only a couple minutes. I didn't personally feel unsafe, but that one it wasn't as clear of markers, I guess. But overall, I think they were really, really well done.
Yeah, I think so too.
All right, related to that, are they cleaning the rides or cleaning ride seats and vehicles between rides, between riding parties?
No.
I agree.
And that's the answer. They're not. There's no attempt to. They do give you hand sanitizer before you get on the rides, but yeah, there's no attempt to clean them. That being said, most rides I felt perfectly fine on. The only one I had a personal hard time with is we did go on Men in Black, and you use a handgun to kind of shoot those aliens. When we got off it, I made sure to clean my hands, and I probably wouldn't go back on that one because without them cleaning the guns after each person, I just personally didn't really feel that comfortable on it. But other than that, even without them cleaning it in between, the fact that they give you that hand sanitizer right before you get on, and I didn't feel any real concern going on any rides.
For the rides, do you think the waits were longer or shorter than normal? Because, like, obviously there's less people, but they can put only, each time we'd get on a ride, I'd say, like, you'd have half the seats were filled, or, like, if we were on Dudley Do Right, we were the only two in the ride flume. So what do you think?
Yeah, I would say excluding Hagrid's, which was way faster. Hagrid's was amazing. We went on it twice, and maybe 30 minutes from the time we got in line to the time we got off the ride both times. But other than that, my guess is relatively close to average or maybe a little bit under. Definitely not longer. And there's way, way fewer people in the lines. But again, they're filling less seats. So it does kind of offset each other. But yeah, I'd say, at worst, you were waiting the same amount of time. What do you think?
I think some of them were much lower. So I think some of the less popular rides, like Cat in the Hat, maybe can normally have a little bit of a wait, but it was like complete walk on. Hagrid's was a short wait, but it is a virtual queue required. So while we said we waited 30 minutes, it's not like you walked in the park and waited 30 minutes. So there are definitely differences in kind of the process of going on rides as well, and we'll talk about that a bit when we talk about maybe Express Pass. But yeah, so I would say generally though, I think the waits were probably a little bit less, especially if you go on weekdays, they seem to be quieter. So somebody asked, are they doing child swaps? So we went as 2 adults. However, when we rode the Hippogriff ride, I did see a person in front of us do a child swap, and they are doing them.
I noticed it on many rides.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually did notice that on a number of rides. Child swap is still allowed. I don't know if it's the exact same process because we've never done it, but they are offering it, and the cast members or the employees seem to have no concerns with it when people were asking.
Yeah, so we didn't do it personally, but it seemed like it was being done and no problems, at least that we observed. All right, for the rides, so do you have to wear a mask when you're on rides? So like water rides, thrill rides, or rides in general?
Water rides, you do not have to. Everything else, you do. And, we did Hagrid's, we did water rides, we did everything in between, and you could have honestly, I think, worn them on water rides if you were more comfortable doing that, having gone on them. I don't think it would have been an issue. But on Hagrid's, roller coaster, fast moving ride, yes, you wear them. And no, there's absolutely no issue with wearing them. I never felt like it was sliding off my face. I never felt like it was detracting from the experience on the ride. It never bothered me on the ride. I mean, to me, it's the least issue when you're on a ride wearing a mask because you just don't have the time to even think about it. You're enjoying the ride and the mask is just, you don't even realize it's there.
Yeah, that was another question we got a lot is, does it fly off? That being said, so we did ride Hagrid's. However, we did not do Hulk or the Rip Rockin'
Yep.
coaster. So those are faster ones. I do think you could always check with a worker to see if you're concerned if your mask isn't tight or you're worried about falling off on specifically a roller coaster. But for us, every ride except for the water rides, we had our masks on. The water rides, we just took them off. Did we take them off on Dudley? I don't remember.
Yeah.
I think we did.
But
yeah.
in short, they're required. You don't have a choice.
Yeah, so just, go in with that.
Yep.
If you're concerned, bring a backup mask about it. Like, going somewhere, I'd say they do sell them there as well.
Yep,
So,
they sell universal masks. I think they were like $6 or 3 for $15 maybe, something like that. But
yeah,
they sell them.
So I actually, since we're already kind of talking about masks, we'll jump down to masks and then we'll come back to the shows and food. But for the masks, they are required to enter the park. So when we're going back to talking about temperature checks, you need to have a mask with you in order to get into the park, and they are not going to provide it for you. So they do have them for sale. I don't know if you could buy it before even getting into the park. I don't think I saw anything like that, but
No, I
you
don't
should
think
plan
so.
on bringing one. If you lose it or if yours isn't holding up, there are some that you can purchase through Universal. So that's something to be aware of. A very common question we got is kind of what your opinion was about wearing a mask all day in the theme park, and did it kind of detract from your experience?
I think the short answer is yes, it detracted. But I will say, how could it not? I mean, you're literally in the summer in Florida and you're putting an extra covering on your face. That being said, I don't think it took away a whole lot from my experience at all. And I hate the heat, probably more than most people. And I had a mask on all day. It was 91, feels like it was in the upper 90s, was the feels like temperature. So it wasn't the hottest day, but it was still pretty hot. It was sunny. I did have a lightweight mask on, and it's warmer. It's not that uncomfortable, though. I was totally fine. We never once went to one of the you stop or you rest areas where you can take the mask off, other than just to walk through it once to see what it was like. I had no issue with it, but we did go into rides where there's air conditioning. We did, eat lunch halfway through the day where you take it off. But I didn't really find it to be an issue. Yes, it's hotter. Yes, it's a little humid in the mask. Yes, it's a little bit uncomfortable. But I think that the trade-off is easy to make. Go to a park, wear a mask, stay home, don't. I'd wear a mask every day.
Yeah, so I think this is very much a personal decision of, are you going to be okay going all day knowing that you have to wear this mask? So it's not like I'm going to go and I'll just take it off and not wear it. Like, you will need to wear the mask. I think you kind of go in. We would wear the mask around here a little bit and see how it felt and just get an idea for it. I'm pretty good in the heat. I was worried about you. So the fact that he made it through the day with the mask and he wasn't like dying, I guess, was a really good sign, I thought. So a lot of people said, honestly, what is it worth it? Honestly, so for us, it's a yes. Does that mean that it will be for you? Maybe not. Each person's different, and I think you kind of need to make your own decision. But for me, I thought it was a perfectly fine trade-off. I felt safer. I was glad I was protecting other people. And so for me, yes, it was worth it going with a mask on.
Yeah, so we used the blue medical masks that you can see in the vlog and our stories. They are very lightweight. We did also have cotton masks. We had masks with filters in them. We had a bunch of different kind that we just tried out, and that one protects you well. It protects other people well. It is very lightweight. It's easy to wear. I would go with that personally. Some of the cotton ones that have a design that look cooler or have, a logo or something on it, those are great. They definitely look cooler than the ones we wore, but they're also a lot hotter. So you make the decision what you want, but we went with the lightweight and we were very happy with it, and it worked really well.
Yeah, we had worn a cloth one, not to the parks, but earlier in the day outside in the heat, or a different day, I should say. And those definitely, for us personally, were hotter. So they look much cooler, but for me, I think I will definitely wear those blue ones again.
Yeah, me too.
And then kind of related to that, so is one mask enough for one day?
Yeah, absolutely. I wore my mask the entire day. I rode it, water rides with it. I might not have had it on the whole time, but it did get a little bit wet. I wore it and had no issues. And that was one of the cheap, what is considered a throwaway or disposable mask. And it held up absolutely fine. No issues whatsoever. So yeah, one mask, absolutely no issue.
Yeah, I think if you're doing the disposable ones and you're concerned about it, like throw an extra one in your pocket or a bag.
We did that.
And we had a
backup because we didn't know how they would last. So we just threw one extra one in my pocket for the day in case one of ours, got ripped or wet or torn or whatever the case may be, and we never had to use it. So, yeah.
Yeah, so for me, I agree. Like one mask for me was perfect, and
Yep.
we went like from start all the way to the end of the night. So it was a very long day, but it lasted fine.
Yeah.
We already kind of touched on this. So were people wearing their masks correctly? I would say most yes, some no. And I think if you weren't, then if a worker did see you, they would tell you to kind of correct it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. Most people had them on. Was it enough? I don't know. It's up to you. I kind of think it's a rule. You have to follow it. Should be 100% of the people wearing them. Were they, not quite 100, but a good majority of the people, almost all, had it on the right way, and were having no issues with it.
So overall, did you feel safe at Universal?
Yeah, I felt fine. I felt that they did as good as they could, and because of the masks, because of social distancing, the hand sanitizing stuff, I felt pretty safe. I'll talk about where I didn't feel safe as soon as you answer this.
Okay, so I agree. I also felt safe. I think this is, again, a very personal question. We are two adults. We aren't having any contact with family members or friend members now that we're home. And I felt safe at the park based on kind of our habits. So I'll talk a little bit more about food. Maybe this is what you were going to go.
No. So I was going to talk City Walk, however,
that's
at
true.
night. So the parks close early, about 7 o'clock, I think. And we left the park one night, what was maybe 7:30 or so. We were out. And City Walk, there is no social distancing. Tons of people have drinks with no face masks on. There is no way to get around people. So I will say that I felt far less safe on City Walk at 7:30 p.m. than I ever did in any of the parks. So if it really is a big concern of yours, like, can I stay away from people even if you want to? On City Walk, you can't. So I would just encourage you to think ahead, like, well, if everybody's leaving the park at 7 to go to City Walk and eat, because what else are you going to do when parks close at 7? Maybe you want to plan, to leave a little bit earlier, or just be aware that situation is far different than the experience I had in the parks. City Walk during the day, we did lunch over there. Easy, empty. We walked right into our place that we ate. But that's because people are still in the parks. Night is completely different from our experience.
Yeah, I completely agree. So when we were talking about crowds and congestion, City Walk is definitely like the red flag.
Yeah.
And again, you can have your mask down if you're eating or drinking, and so that's why there's so many people with drinks in their hands walking around talking, and so it's definitely harder to police. And so yeah, that's a very good point. I would also say, like, did we feel safe? I think we purposely made a few decisions that for me felt safer. For example, when we ate food, we only ate outside. So we would have snacks that we could eat outside. When we ate lunch, it was at the patio at Margaritaville, which was spaced out in an outdoor shaded location. So we personally just chose those options as opposed to indoor spaces where people could have the mask down. We did peek into some of the indoor spaces, and they do have you spread out. Personally, though, we just felt we preferred the outdoor locations. We also ate inside our hotel room once. So those are just some like options that do what is best for kind of you and your family. Okay, I think those are the safety mask related questions. Let's go back to an in-park question. And somebody asked, they still doing shows? So we talked about rides. Are shows still taking place?
Yeah, shows are taking place, and they're an awesome experience. So they have everything that they have set up for the rides. They also have for the shows in terms of social distancing. They have markers. You can sit here. You can stand here. Where there's not markers, no, you can't. And when they're seating, they're spacing people out. It's a perfect experience. I would say that you are just as safe at a show as you are in any ride, if not even safer, because there's less moving. Once you kind of get your spot, you just stay there. So shows are happening, and they're doing them incredibly well.
Yeah, I think that's two things that Universal definitely did well. Are so a lot of their shows are outside shows,
Mm-hmm.
so we watched a few of those. Like Jeff said, you stood in a square. Like we watched the puppet show in the Harry Potter area, and they were really done well. Also for related character kind of meet and greets, like you have the train conductor in Hogwarts area, and there was kind of like a space where you couldn't get up super close, and he'd be up there and kind of wave and interact with guests. So they still have a lot of those kind of character interactions or themed people interactions, but you're still distanced from
Mm-hmm.
them. So I thought that was extremely well done, both the shows and kind of some of the
Mm-hmm.
character experiences. All right, let's go to in-park food. So how easy was it getting food inside the theme parks?
This is my biggest criticism of the whole reopening, but to be honest, I don't know how they can fix it. Lines for food in the park are longer than the rides.
Mm-hmm.
And this is for not even good food. Like there was probably 50 people in line to get a hot dog at the park. So the issue is they there's just as many people who want to eat at lunchtime, but now restaurants can only fit, a third, a quarter of the number of people inside because of social distancing. And I don't really know how they can fix it because unless they open up more restaurants in the short term, it's just a lot of people want to eat. They can't accommodate as many people. It's causing huge lines. So that's actually why we left and ate at Margaritaville on City Walk. We walked right up, prime lunchtime, no wait, grabbed a seat. But in-park dining is an awful experience.
I would agree. I think if you want to get a snack, so if you want like a butter beer or an ice cream, those aren't too bad because they can
Mm-hmm.
still turn people over pretty quick. They still have you social distance when you're waiting in lines for quick service or snacks or whatever. So they do have you kind of markered and
Mm-hmm.
spaced out. So I would say like snacks are okay, but if you meals in the parks, I would agree with Jeff. I would recommend either bringing stuff with you or going outside the park and kind of eating at City Walk and then going back
Yeah.
in after. Somebody had asked specifically, did we notice if waiters or waitresses were wearing gloves in the restaurants? For us, our at Margaritaville, I guess, is the only sit-down location we
Yeah.
did that was related to Universal, and there
They did not.
our waiter did not. I believe when they brought out our food, the person who brought out the food was not our waiter. May have had gloves on, but I don't recall specifically. Do you?
I don't think any of them had gloves
Okay.
on, but they have really nice setup there. They don't reach over the table. Everything is placed right at the edge. They bring you out a special little container with everything pre-wrapped in it, and I assume it's just in the container because they can clean that very easily. We had one-year single-use menus. Like I said, they won't touch anything. They just set it down on the table, apologize. They can't actually put your food in front of you, but you have to reach over and get it. So there were no gloves, but I was absolutely fine with it. It was very clear that they were taking precautions, at least at Margaritaville.
Yeah, I thought Margaritaville did fabulous. Like I felt like they did as good as they could
Yeah.
with keeping
I
it kind of safe.
actually thought they went too extreme in terms of the number of tables that they had on their porch. We were, I would say, 15 feet from the next closest table. I mean, they could have put more tables on there and I still would have felt safe. So they've erred on the side of extra caution, which I appreciated.
I agree. Yeah. So I think that's it for the food stuff. All right, now we are going to be on to hotels. So when we were there, we spent one night at Aventura Hotel. We then switched over to Royal Pacific for our second night because we wanted an express pass. So we'll talk about that in a second. But first, just for our experience at the hotel. So the first one is kind of the check-in process and getting to your room. So how was interaction with cast members at check-in and then getting to your room via like elevator?
Yeah, so to enter any hotel, you either need that wristband or to get your temperature checked. You're not allowed in otherwise. Then you go and wait in line. There's social distancing markers there. They have plastic shields up between you and the cast member or the employee checking you in. And they clean everything right before you touch it. I mean, I'm pretty sure they made them do it so you could see them cleaning it, like the credit card reader. And yeah, the check-in process, very simple.
Yeah.
Getting to your room, there are signs that say please limit the number of parties in an elevator to you and your party and no one else. That is absolutely not enforced or followed by anyone.
Yeah.
To the point where we actually just took the stairs at Royal Pacific because it was just at times kind of uncomfortable how many people thought that they should just pile into an elevator with you. Aventura was a little different. They have a much larger elevator bank, and it did seem like over there people were respecting it, but absolutely not at Royal Pacific, not even close.
I agree with that. And I don't know if it's just because they had more elevators there or why it was the case, but I definitely agree with that. I will say, so you do get your temperature check, like Jeff said, when you come in. The entire time you're at the hotels, you still have to wear a face mask unless you're in your room or in the pool. So,
Or eating or drinking.
or eating or drinking, yes, sorry. But yeah, when you're walking around and stuff, just because you're at the hotel doesn't mean you can't wear a mask. So when you get at the hotel, you should have a mask on. Be prepared for that. So basically all the same kind of safety precautions that you'll see in the theme parks also apply to the resorts, which I think is good. Let's talk a little bit, you just mentioned food options. I would say food options were far better at Aventura than they were at Royal Pacific, even though Aventura is more the value hotel, so I think it's one of the cheapest ones available. Royal Pacific's one of the more expensive hotels, but the food options way, way better at Aventura in the current conditions.
Yeah, at Royal Pacific, there's no bars open. They have what you call a quick service place where we went at 7:30 at night, which you'd think would be pretty prime time, or maybe it was 8, considering the park's closed. And the only hot food they had available was a pretzel. As opposed to this, you can go to Aventura and they have their dining options open downstairs. They have a bar downstairs. They have a rooftop bar that's open that also serves food. The options over there were incredible compared to Royal Pacific. And if I'm being honest, if it wasn't for the Express Pass, in my opinion, Royal Pacific has failed miserably. I would encourage 0 people to go there unless you want the Express Pass, which is why we were there. But I was so underwhelmed by the experience at Royal Pacific that if they asked me their opinion, I'd be happy to share it with them.
Yeah, so I would say we have stayed in Royal Pacific in none these times and have enjoyed it. I think just because there's so little that's offered right now, it's definitely hard to kind of justify the price. For me, the two main things, Express Pass, which you mentioned, and then also it is a much closer walk to the park. So if you're looking for a shorter walk, the location, I'd argue, of this one is probably the best. This or Hard Rock are going to be the closest ones. So if you're wanting a short walk, but honestly, the walk from Aventura we did, and it was not bad.
Easy.
It's definitely longer. I'd say it's probably twice as long, but
Yeah.
it's very easy path. So
But you don't have to walk. They have boats and buses that will take you to the parks.
well, I think you would have to walk and then pick
Well,
up
yeah,
the boat from
you
that.
pick up the boat
But their
from
buses-
the hotel right across the street from you. It's like a 3-minute walk to Sapphire Falls, which does have a boat.
Right. Yeah, or the buses seem to come pretty frequently from Aventura.
They were always there, yeah.
Yeah, so those were good. I would say the cleanliness and temperature checks and wristbands were pretty consistent across both resorts.
Yeah, there was no difference.
Everything was in the room was very clean. I felt like the lobby and all that stuff was very clean. So I think cleanliness wise, it was pretty even between the two. Which would we recommend? So
I think really the experience at Aventura is significantly better. There's absolutely no doubt about it in my mind. Royal Pacific, for the price and what is considered I guess you'd say, a higher end resort, it was lacking in so many different areas. I will say though, Royal Pacific gives you in your ticket a Express Pass, and you get it for the day you check in and the next day. And the Express Pass, which you can also purchase separately, is unbelievably valuable, probably even more so in the current environment in the parks than on a normal day.
yeah, so let's just talk about express passes. So again, with the Royal Pacific aspect, what Jeff was saying is, so we spent the night in Aventura, and then we went at like 6:30 a.m. and checked into Royal Pacific because we wanted that express pass for our day, because we knew the next day we'd be leaving. So in a perfect world, you'd get 2 days, park days out of it, and really get the full value from that. So what an express pass is in the current universal setting is it basically means you're able to go into the express pass or fast pass queue for all the rides that have it available. In the current situation, what it also means is that if a ride is currently in virtual queue only, then you can still go on that ride. I'll let you explain it because I think you grasp the virtual queue a little better than I do.
Yeah, so rides can either be standby and virtual queue, or virtual queue only, and it just kind of depends on what the crowd level is at that time. So standby is what you think. You go, you get in line, you stand by, you wait. Virtual queue just means you're still going to be in a standby line. It just means that you can't get in line unless you have essentially a spot saved through that virtual queue to get in it. The thing about that is when you sign up for a virtual queue, it tells you what time you come back. You can't just get right on it. It's kind of confusing over there because sometimes rides are virtual queue only, sometimes they're standby. It's not like one ride is always one thing. The exception being Hagrid's is always virtual queue. Yeah, it's kind of confusing, and I could see it being pretty frustrating because the app itself doesn't really work that well. There would be times where Ride said virtual queue, and we wanted to know how does it work. So we would log in and try and get a virtual queue spot, and sometimes it would say there's none available. Sometimes it would say there's tons available, and then you try and click it, and it doesn't allow you to. It says, oh, sorry, some errors occurred. That time isn't here. And so the app itself for that doesn't operate as smoothly as you would hope. The nice thing is that if you have Express Pass, you don't even have to use it. You don't have to get a return time. You literally just go get in line, and you still get to use that express lane. So not only are you avoiding having to get that return time for the virtual queue, you don't have to worry about what rides are at what status. You just go get in the short line whenever you want and ride the ride. The exception, of course, then is Hagrid's, which you can kind of talk about.
Yeah, so for Hagrid's, that's the only one where there is a virtual queue and your Express Pass doesn't work. So what this means is for Hagrid's, you want to make sure you're on the app if park opens at 9, for us, they said it might open at 8:40, 8:45, 8:50. I think it was right around 8:45 that it opened up. And then you go and you click on a time slot. So if you're familiar with Disney more than Universal, it's kind of like getting a Fast Pass on your app, or if you know Max Pass on your app. It's kind of like that where you go and you click a time slot where you can come back and enter the ride line. So that's kind of what the virtual queue is like. But if you have the Express Pass, you basically don't have to worry about anything, which I think is the best part, except for getting that Hagrid's Pass first thing in the morning. And once you have it, you go in your time slot, ride it, and you're all squared away. But, go ahead.
So Express Pass essentially works on any ride that has an Express Pass lane, and Hagrid's doesn't, so that's why that doesn't do it. And then if there's some rides that maybe are just so unpopular that they don't have one, that also doesn't work for you. But those rides aren't going to have a virtual queue anyway. So yeah, anytime there's an Express Pass line, you get to use your Express Pass on that ride.
Yeah, I honestly think it's almost every ride.
It is almost
like
every
Cat in the
ride,
Hat had
yeah.
it, the train. So so many rides had it. So my advice is, if you, like for us, we only had the one day. The Express Pass made it so we could get on so many more rides. If you're trying to limit your time indoors waiting for rides because of exposure or safety, like the Express Pass is going to be much faster on a lot of rides. I think it's a little bit of, is it a busy-ish day in this time period? If it is, Express Pass will be worthwhile. If you happen to go on a dead day, it may not be as worthwhile, but I think the best thing is not having to think. You can just go on every ride. You don't have to be tied to the app all day trying to get those slots. So for us, the ease of it definitely made it. The ease and the fact we were able to get a lot more done definitely made it worthwhile for us.
Yeah, Express Pass, I would recommend 100% the way the current parks are set up. Absolutely no doubt.
All right, so anything else on Express Pass?
It's awesome.
I agree. So I think if you're going even right now, I would still recommend getting it if you can fit it in your budget.
Honestly, I'd say if it's go now or wait a month and save up a little bit extra to buy this extra feature, I'd wait.
Yeah.
It makes it that much more enjoyable.
And you get it. It comes with, if you stay at Royal Pacific, just double check which hotels do it. So it can be worthwhile. If you have 2 days, it's definitely cheaper usually to go to the hotel. But if you're just going for one day, you could also check the price and kind of see.
And there's
what
options. I think you can get it so you can ride each ride one time, and there's unlimited ones. So there's options out there, different costs, different ways to get it. But look into those if you're looking into doing that.
Yeah. So, okay. So was this your best experience at Universal? So is this the best time you've had at Universal?
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not. It was an awesome experience, but I don't know what would make it the best. I had to wear a mask. You had to just kind of be a little bit on edge, even if you're not worried about it, it's just a different environment. So no, it wasn't my best, but I still had a great time.
I would agree. So I would say the measures make it so you are thinking about stuff. I would say having lower crowds, being able to go. So we rode the Hogwarts Express and we had our own car because of the social distancing measures. You couldn't be in that space with other people. That was kind of cool. So there's definitely certain things that are nice. But yeah, I agree that you do have to kind of think over stuff. You are wearing the mask, which is hotter.
If you're hungry, you can't get food.
Yeah, that part is tough too. So a bunch of people asked kind of, is it worth going? Specifically, well, I think generally we say yes, like it was a really good time.
I think it's a great time. I think they've got the shows worked out. I think they've got the rides worked out. I think they've got just about everything set up well, except for maybe the dining, which like I said, I don't know what they can really do to fix that. So yes, if you are only somewhat uncomfortable with the current situation, I think you'd have a great time. You know, if you're very uncomfortable and you want to go to a place where every single person is going to have on a mask and obey social distancing at all time, and rides are going to be wiped down after every person gets off with hand sanitizer located everywhere, you're going to have a horrible time. It's going to be stressful, and you're just not going to enjoy your time there. But again, if you're okay with, you know, pretty good following of the rules and efforts made by most people, then we had a great time. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say we're also coming from Tennessee, where the state is fully open. And so for us, we don't go out lots here, but I think seeing that and then going down there, this actually seemed like everyone was wearing a mask, like as opposed to the grocery store where not a lot of people don't wear masks in our state. So I think it maybe also might matter like what type of environment you're coming from to go to Universal. So as an out-of-state person, we're coming from a state where it's pretty relaxed. We're in the phase where lots of stuff is open. And then some people said, like, is it worth it if you're only looking to take one trip a year? Should we do this or should we go to Disney World? I think that's like a very personal question. So
well, we also don't know what Disney World is going to be like, although I'll say that to me, just from what I've read about Disney's not doing parades, they're not doing shows, they're not doing character meet and greets. All of those things to me are what make Disney special, right? How can you, especially if you're a kid, not get to see parades, fireworks, meet Mickey, those kind of things? It's not the case at Universal. I mean, they don't even have really night shows. They're not doing them because the parks are closing at 7. It's still light out, but the shows are still going on. You can still see the characters out. You just can't get real close to them, and like you would normally go up and hug Mickey or something like that. But I think that in terms of what you would expect to get on a normal vacation at Universal, they're delivering pretty close to that, whereas I don't think that's going to be the case at Disney. I think Disney's going to be a far lesser experience from what you would normally get at a Disney park.
Yeah, I think it's exactly like that. Like, what do you want out of your trip? I think if your family would be excited about a Universal trip, then yeah, make that your trip. I think it's done. For us, it was done very well. So I think that's kind of up to you. You just mentioned, so one of the questions was, are the park hours different right now than normal? They definitely are closing, at least for us, it was 7 p.m. I think some nights might be 6 p.m. So just check the park calendar.
They're shortened hours, for sure, yeah.
So that's just something to be aware of. But again, they are modifying things all the time. So just check before you plan on going. I know, like for us, we're traveling out of state. We're fortunate enough that we could drive, so it was somewhat unplanned. But I'd say, like, do your best to kind of keep an eye on it as your trip gets closer, just so you can kind of make a mental note of what to plan for when you get there. So related to that, do you think one day is enough to hit both parks in this environment?
If you have an express pass and you're there at open, yes, you go in, you get your Hagrid's virtual queue, and then you just express pass your way around, and you'd be fine, especially on a weekday. Without an express pass, I think it would be very difficult to get through everything. Now, when I say you could do it all in one day, I'm not saying you can go to every show and do every ride, but you would have a very full day where you'd go home tired and very happy with what you did.
I agree. I definitely think weekdays are much better. So try to do that if you can. If you just want to do Harry Potter, so one person said, like, if I just want to focus on Harry Potter, could I get the 2 Harry Potter lands done? That I think you definitely could get
in a morning.
You could get both of those done probably without too much struggle, even without the express pass. So if you don't care about the other stuff, that's an option. How many days would you recommend if it's your first time going to Universal?
So I do 2 if you just want Universal and Islands of Adventure, 3 if you want Volcano Bay as well, because I can't imagine you going to Volcano Bay and then an amusement or one of the theme parks. Volcano Bay also closes, I think, at 5 or 5:30. So by the time that you're out of there and the other parks are closing early, you can't go to them. But I would get a ticket that allows you to hop between the 2 parks. You'll have a great time. You get to ride the Hogwarts Express between the 2. I think there's more than enough if you're interested in the shows and that kind of stuff as well to kind of go ahead and spend 2 full days there and you'd be fine.
Yeah, especially if you have the express pass, I think that helps. If you want a slower pace, you want to rest in the middle of the day, go back and swim, maybe add one more day. It kind of depends on, are you a go, go, go family or are you a lounge and relax family? So I think those things will factor in, but I agree with multiple days is definitely going to help. Can you do it in one day? Yes, but it's going to be a lot crazier. But I think as many days as you can. I'd probably say wouldn't go over like 4 days.
I wouldn't go over 2 days. And then the third if you're doing Volcano Bay. I mean,
that's fair.
If you have an express pass, honestly, I don't know what you do for more than 2 days.
Yeah.
Unless you just wanted to walk around and go in all the shops. You would do all the rides. I mean, you would do all the rides and all the shows in 2 days, in my opinion.
Yes, if you have an express pass.
Yes.
If you don't have an express pass, you might want that extra day.
You might, yeah. That would definitely be a factor.
Yeah. Okay. And then a couple other. So our price is the same in the parks. I didn't notice like buying drinks and stuff, anything to be different. But we don't go super frequently to Universal. When it comes to ticket prices, we have annual passes, so I didn't really pay attention too much to those. So I'm sorry, I'm not a huge help on that one.
I haven't heard anything about prices increasing or anything though. So I mean, I'm gonna guess that they're not much different if they are at all.
And we did book the hotels very last minute, and they were still like reasonably priced. I want to say Aventura was just under $100. Royal Pacific, I can't remember. I think it was
like $269 or something like that.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Comes with 2 days of express pass for 2 of us, so it's really 4 express passes. So that's about the cost of it.
Yeah, so just keep an eye on those. Again, weekdays I think were cheaper than weekends. And then the last one was, can you bring phones on the rides, and how do lockers work in the current environment?
So phones on the ride, I'll say, yeah, you can absolutely bring your phone on the ride, all of them, if you want. If you're talking about just putting it in your pocket, like you want to avoid a locker. If you're talking about bringing your phone on a ride to record, Universal is pretty strict on recording. So some rides, they don't really seem to care. Other rides, they're very strict on. I don't know personally. I couldn't tell you this ride you're allowed, this ride you're not. It's gonna be hit and miss. But you know, if you want to bring it on the ride and try and record and they tell you not to, put it in your pocket, because they are allowed on all the rides in your pockets. Lockers, you want to?
Yeah, so lockers are free for the small lockers. So Universal, as opposed to Disney, is going to have you put your purse or your backpack or that type of stuff in lockers way often. So even like Men in Black, you had to put your stuff in a locker. So you would kind of go to a line, drop your stuff off in a locker, free locker. You'll just scan your park ticket, go on the ride, come off, and then scan it and get your stuff out. If it goes over a certain amount of times, you can't like keep it in there all day. Then you could run into problems. There are larger lockers for purchase if you want to do those. We never do that. We always just have a small one. But you will need those on certain rides because they will not let you bring any type of bags on the ride. So if you don't have a bag, you won't need to worry about the lockers. But if you do.
Yeah, and for the lockers, those do actually have queues as well. It's part of it. So for instance, Hagrid's, you scan your return time, you get in a line. That line's for the locker if you need one. Then you go drop off your stuff, then you get in the ride line, then you come back out and you get back in line to get to the lockers again, because they are social distancing in the lockers as well. So they're only putting one person at each locker bank at a time, which is kind of nice. It is in some parts, you know, for Gringotts example, they're only allowing one person into the locker room per party. So if you've got kids, I'm sure they would make an exception. They're not gonna make your kids stand outside alone. But, for the 2 of us, they'd said we need a locker. One of us could go in, the other one had to wait outside. They're just trying to, I think, keep crowds from forming around those lockers.
Yeah. So, but overall, I thought, general final thoughts on the park experience, I thought it was pretty well done. It was better than I thought it would be.
I give them an A-, which is pretty good because I didn't expect it to go very well, to be honest. They did a lot right, and I felt safe. I had a great time. I don't really know how much they could do to make some of those things better, like the dining or getting 100% of people just to comply with the rules at all times. It's a really good experience, and we had a great time. I'm sure we're going to head back at some point.
I agree. So yeah, I will say as like a parting thought is that this is definitely our experience and our personal preferences. I think you should always do what's best for kind of you and your family, but hopefully this was helpful. We appreciate all of you leaving us questions. If you did leave us a question through Instagram, if you have a question and we didn't answer it here, leave it in a comment below and we'll go through and kind of respond to those if you have something we missed. Also, if you want to see more what it was like, we did vlog the entire day. So that will be coming out shortly, or if you're watching it after it's already premiered, it will be available. But we do have all of that we'll put together and share with you if you want to actually like see what the crowds were like and see what the park was like. We did capture some of that in the vlog as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, can't wait to share the vlog with you all, and thank you so much for watching.
Yeah, thanks.